3rd, 2021. Welcome our viewers on YouTube, and as well as members of the media and members of the public here tonight in the City Council chambers. And we have all of our councillors present. We have our CAO Rob Philpott present, and our technical services engineer Aaron McDonald, and Linda Stevenson from Technical Services. And who else we got here? That's the city staff. So at this point, I would just, as a matter of fact, about 20 after the city lawyer phoned again, and I have a conflict because my daughter lives in the lot right beside this proposal. So he said, call the meeting to order, turn it over to the chair of planning board. And so I'm going to do that, and at this point, welcome everybody, and I'm declaring a conflict, and it's going to be recorded, and I'll turn it over to Councillor Brian McFeely, the chair of the planning board committee. The floor is yours, sir. And just give me a half a second, I'll be out the door.
I thank you, Your Worship. We will commence with the February 3rd meeting of Planning Board. The one and only item on the agenda is the zoning amendment for Collin Avenue. So we would ask for a motion to approve the agenda as circulated. Moved by Councillor Adams, seconded by Councillor Ramsey, that the meeting or the agenda be approved as circulated. All those in favor say aye. Contrary, motion carried. So just for the information and welcome folks and those who are watching, just a little bit of background information, just to maybe kind of reiterate what we said the other night, that tonight is planning board meeting. The three voting members of planning board are Councillor Ramsey, Councillor Adams, and myself as chair. Other councillors are certainly present, and we encourage that, and we encourage their participation and input. But when it comes time to vote, our role here tonight is to hear information from the report from staff in terms of trying to provide answers and information to the questions that were raised at the public meeting, and other information relating to the application, and for the planning board to make a recommendation to council, and that recommendation then would go to council on the 17th of January, I think it is, the Tuesday night, so, or February, excuse me. I don't know why I keep saying January. So with that, we have a lot of reading to do and a lot of stuff to get through. So maybe we'll move right into the process. So February 3rd, Planning Board, the recommendation regarding Collin Avenue zoning amendment. The supporting explanation, purpose. The purpose of the zoning amendment is to rezone from R1 to R2 to allow semi-detached dwellings. The applicant is proposing 10 semi-detached dwellings at the south end of Collin Avenue. The semi-detached dwellings will be fronting Collin Avenue. Semi-detached means a building that is divided vertically into two side-by-side dwelling units. Both units are constructed directly on grade and separated from each other by a vertical wall or concrete or masonry firewall. Semi-detached dwellings require individual public utilities and street frontage for each dwelling unit and can be subdivided as per section 8.15. R1 zone permitted uses: single-family dwelling, accessory building, assisted living. R2 zone permitted uses: single-family dwelling, semi-detached dwelling, duplex dwelling, accessory building, and assisted living. There is a map showing the proposed lot layout. The background, an application that we'll just table that map as well. Background, an application was received from Robbins Equity Group Limited for PID number 1005123 to amend the city zoning bylaw. Schedule B zoning map from single-family residential R1 zone to low-density mixed residential R2 zone. A public meeting was held on January 28, 2021, and council gave first reading on the same date. Report under section 5.7 of the zoning bylaw, where planning board reviews a zoning bylaw amendment, it has to consider the following general criteria as applicable. Under section 8.1 4 of the Parks and Green Space Plan. The criteria B, C, E, G, and H must be considered. Conformity. So A, conformity with all requirements of this bylaw. Staff comment. Should council approve the zoning map amendment from R1 to R2, the applicant will be permitted to construct a semi-detached dwelling subject to the R2 development standards as noted below. The proposed building location must meet or exceed all required setbacks from property lines. The change in density is 10 units R1 versus 20 units R2. And I'm not going to read the entire chart there, but the chart is there, and we would table that, showing the R2 zone, the lot area, the lot depth, the frontage, front yard, side yards, rear yards, maximum height, and flankage yard. B, conformity with the official plan. Staff comment, the rezoning conforms to the official plan. R1 and R2 are low-density housing. Section 5.1, residential development, and Section 4.4, subsection 1, parkland, parks, and green space plan. 5.1, residential development. The first part of this section describes general residential development policies pertaining to housing options, zoning categories, and residential land allocation. The second part describes specific policies pertaining to special planning and development areas and locations for high-density housing. The third part deals with other residential issues. So residential densities, low housing types in low density is single-family, semi-detached, and duplexes. Maximum lot size 67,881 to 7,500 and 8,000 and 8,000 respectively. Parkland 4.4.1, mini parks. Summerside has 13 mini parks, most of which are oriented to the needs of hereby residential area, and these are taken right out of the park plan. The one in question here is the Bluebell Park. The number behind those is just depicting on a map that you'll see in a couple of pages here, but so the Bluebell Park would be the one in question here. The average size of the city's mini parks is 2.47 acres or 0.48 hectares. Typically they are equipped with picnic tables and a playground and often a water feature in the summer, though equipment may be moved around between parks to meet changing needs. Fairview Park and Centennial Park also have small gardens, and Bluebell Park is unusual in having a beautiful natural area. City parks. Summerside has 9 city parks which serves the specialized needs of the whole community and visitors. And the particular one of interest here is the Rotary Park, and on the map we'll see that is number 120. City parks come in all sizes. The largest is the Rotary Friendship Park at 53 acres, 21.43 hectares, and the smallest is the Loyalist Park at 1.3 acres, 0.52 hectares. The latter is somewhat akin to an urban mini park, but is cataloged as a city park because of its heavy tourist use. Most city parks are oriented to more passive uses, with the notable exception of Queenie Park, which has been the site of numerous hosted baseball events that bring in numerous visitors and prestige to the city. The endowment of the Rotary Friendship Park to the city is a testimony of Summerside's volunteer spirit. Green Shore Park was completed in 2002 as part of the city's $5 million Summerside West End development project of shoreline infilling designed to both remove the long-standing odor problem for local residents and to create an attractive waterfront park for city residents and tourists. It also contains the Bedek Bay Boardwalk Promenade. New parkland. The program includes potential for 9 new or expanded parks, and this is what's envisioned, I guess, in the official plan. Not that this is necessarily going to happen in the immediate future because it's all related to budget. The piece in that pertinent to Bluebell is the Bluebell Mini Neighborhood Park Extension. The existing Bluebell Mini Park is 2.55 acres, 1.03 hectares in size. located in an area with potentially high population growth, and accordingly, it is proposed to expand the site southward by about 1 hectare and upgrade its status to have a neighborhood park. Trail connection would also be made from the park to provide a continuous link between McEwen Road and Walker Avenue and southward into future developing areas. So that's kind of the council statements within the park plan, long-term plan, and as I said, certainly contingent on budgets on an annual basis. So if you look at the map there, you'll see the area called, designated as 680 and 685, Neighborhood Park, South Rotary Park. Proposed new neighborhood park, 5 acres or 2 hectares, would be accessed off the proposed east-west connector street joining McEwen Road with Water Street East. The new park would link directly to the Hall Family Lane. So this is all sort of visionary stuff, again, dependent on budgets and that going forward. C, the suitability of the land for proposed development. Staff comment: this site is physically suitable for development and has been intended for development since 1987 when it was first approved. The site is suitable for low-density residential land use. The existing public street network and municipal services can be extended to this development. The proposed street connections are orderly and follow the existing and proposed street patterns. Collin Avenue is intended to be connected to the proposed east-west connector street. D, compatibility of the proposed development with surrounding land uses, including both existing and projected uses. Staff comment: the subject property abuts residential land uses with R1 zoning along the east, west, and north boundaries, and R2 zone along the south boundary. The rezoning from R1 to R2 would be compatible with the surrounding zoning, as both R1 and R2 zoning are low-density land uses. The future land use plan supports residential development in the surrounding areas, and the map is attached showing those intended zones. E, any comments from residents or other interested persons? Staff comment: a public meeting was held on January 28, 2020. The public meeting notice was advertised in the January 16th edition of The Guardian. 33 letters were mailed to 19 property owners. Jeff Adams, Robbins Equity Group Limited representative, provided an explanation along with the proposed lot layout and building plans. Written comments were received from the public regarding this application and are attached to this report. There were 29 persons from the public in attendance. 10 people spoke at the public meeting. Don Anderson, 251 Collin Avenue; Thane Smallwood, 254 Walker Avenue; Marg Laird, 252 Collin Avenue; Leslie Kerwin, 243 Walker Avenue; Dan Kuchar, 203 Cousins Court; Mania Matheson, 254 Collin Avenue; Randy Gallant, 247 Collin Avenue; Kim McCarthy, 253 Collin Avenue; Craig Noonan, 233 Mountain Avenue; and Rob McCauley, 241 Mountain Avenue. The concerns raised by residents have been addressed throughout this report. And that map shows where the residents who spoke at the meeting and who provided written comment reside. F, adequacy of the existing water, sewer, road, stormwater, and electrical services, city parking and parklands for accommodating the development, and any projected infrastructure requirements. Staff comment: the city water supply and sewer treatment systems can handle the additional loading created by the change in zoning from R1 to R2. Collin Avenue has a 200 millimeter distribution main on the street and can handle the water requirements for this change in zoning. The developer is responsible for any new water mains and service requirements and the connection to the city water distribution system. The proposed development of 10 semi-detached buildings in an R2 versus 10 single-family dwellings in an R1 zone would mean a difference of an estimated 1,700 U.S. gallons of water a day. The city's water supply, when all wells are in operation, is capable of around 6 million U.S. gallons a day. Currently, the estimated demand in the water supply system is around 3.5 million U.S. gallons a day, including fire flows. The proposed development would allow the city to connect the water mains on Mountain Avenue and Collin Avenue. Collin Avenue has a 200 millimeter gravity collection main on Collin Avenue that can handle the additional sewer loading from this development. The developer is responsible for any new sewer mains and services and the connections to the existing main. The developer is responsible for all servicing costs due to zoning changes and land development. The proposed development would allow the city to connect the street network to Mountain Avenue and Collin Avenue. There is adequate city storm drainage infrastructure surrounding the property on Collin Avenue to accommodate the drainage from this property. Existing single-phase power service on Collin Avenue can be extended to service the proposed lots. Overhead services can be provided in coordination with the utility as per the electric rate schedule and policy manual. If the developer wishes to install underground services, the underground design must be submitted and approved by Summerside Electric. There is ample parkland, Rotary Park 5 acres, Bluebell Park 2.5 acres within 400 meters of the subject property. G, impacts from the development on pedestrian vehicular access and safety and on public safety generally. Staff comment. The west section of Walker, phase 1 of the subdivision, has a street width of 11.5 meters, which is comparable to McEwen Road. The remaining section of Walker Avenue and all of Collin Avenue are infilled and are 8.5 meters wide, making them some of the widest local streets in the city. Collin Avenue and Mountain Avenue are local streets with capacities of 5,000 vehicles per day. They will easily handle the additional vehicle traffic. These streets are built to the city standard by local width and have adequate shoulder width to accept pedestrian traffic. Both the Rotary Park and the Bluebell Park are accessible from Lynn Street and Walker Avenue respectively. H, compatibility of the development with environmental, scenic, and heritage resources. Staff comment, there's no impact on environment, scenic, or heritage resources. I, impacts on city finances and budget. Staff comment, there is no impact on city finances and budget. J, other matters as specified in this bylaw. Staff comment, there are no other matters as specified in this bylaw. K, other matters as considered relevant. Staff comment, the first phase of this subdivision was built in early 1980s. The entire subdivision was planned and zoned a combination R1 and R3, which was the Wilmot zoning bylaw. Both zones allowed semi-detached as a permitted use. The housing market demand dictated the build of single-family dwellings, not the zoning. Since 2006, there have been 7 subdivisions built. St. Clair Street, 59 lots, 35 R1, 24 R2. Simmons Avenue, 6 lots, 4 R3, 2 R4. Dory View Street, 27 lots, R3. Pudders Street, 53 lots, 18 R2, 35 R4. Langell Court, 10 lots, 8 R2, 2 R3. Falkland Court, 10 lots, R4 under construction. Starlight, 40 lots, R2 under construction. And Bernard, 10 lots, R1 under construction. There is no evidence to support residential property assessment values are affected negatively as a result of new residential development in an existing area. So the staff have reviewed the application and have considered the criteria under section 5.7 of the zoning bylaw and section 8.4 of the Park and Green Space Plan. Staff support the application from Robbins Equity Group Limited for PID number 1005123 to rezone from R1 to R2. As per section 5.10, subsection B3 of the zoning bylaw, the planning board shall make a recommendation to council on this application before it is approved or denied. The planning board recommendation, whether carried or defeated, will be brought forward for council for a final decision. So before we deal with the recommendation and the resolution to get it on the floor for discussion, we do have a couple of more letters, 3 more letters that were received that I will read into the record. 2 of them were in the package, and I think the 3rd one was circulated, but they should be read into the public record, so we'll do that now. The first one is dated the 30th of January. Dear Mayor and Council, my wife and I reside at 218 Walker Avenue. We were recently blindsided by your decision to allow an apartment building up against our back fence. You even took cash to allow the developer maximum occupancy without any regard for children needing space to play. Now I hear you want to fully surround us in R2 so that we effectively become R2 in small steps. We regret that we could not be there in person for Thursday's meeting as we both cannot breathe in the masks. We did, however, watch live from home and were struck by your safety efforts to reduce the chances of someone catching a virus from a microphone oddly at a meeting proposing to increase traffic in a neighborhood with no sidewalks. We all have to walk our kids, grandchildren, and dogs on the road here in Bluebell. We try to hug the side of the road, hoping the approaching car from behind has enough room and that he-C sees us. However, it is very unnerving. We have often found ourselves skirting our grandchildren into the grass, particularly where Walker Avenue takes a bend. Not so easy, though, when there's a snowbank there. I would implore you to be consistent in your concern for the safety of others and reject this dangerous escalation of people and motorists sharing the same path. Let the record show that you voted for safety. And that's sincerely Paul and Michelle McGregor, 218 Walker Avenue. And the next one, again on 30th of January. Thank you for the opportunity to have input into this important issue. I watched the online recording of council meeting regarding the proposed Bluebell zone change. I could not attend because I had to work that evening and am so pleased that so many were able to attend and spoke so well for our community. There are 2 things that I'd like to add beyond the one entrance to our community being an issue. One is the miserable narrow corner on Walker that is tricky to maneuver because of parking and snow and any number of other issues. It is contentious and dangerous even with the existing traffic. The other is the fact that in order for us to be able to go anywhere by foot in our neighborhood, we must walk on the road that will, as one person suggested, have twice the vehicular traffic if this project goes through than we do now. Unless the safety of the area residents and children is taken into account by adding sidewalks and another exit, the city will be endangering its own citizens by adding a compressed residential situation into an existing R1 zoning that exists now. The added cost of providing these necessities to make the community safe and on par with other newer communities should be an effective and reasonable deterrent to this project. It has not been that long ago that this area, and in particular Collin Avenue residents, had to petition and pay for ditch infilling. We did that for safety reasons as well as love of our community. The idea that another road might be added someday should not lull us into thinking it will happen. We all have worked hard and sacrificed to live here, and as another person said so well, there is room for R1 areas that are exclusively that. It is important that city planners, council, and committees understand that and respect those who live in R1 zones by not changing the original zoning, which will affect so many in that community. We purchased home in part because their zoning, and for that to be changed midstream is disappointing and unnecessary. Thank you to all residents for all their good input. I hope we are not only heard but listened to and heeded. thank you and for giving us a voice in this important decision regarding our community, and that's signed by Anna and Dean McDonald. And I don't have the street address for that. And the final letter, I will read it to into the record. It's a little bit lengthy, so please bear with me. Dated February 2nd via email to Linda Stevenson. It says, Dear Sir, Madame, zoning bylaw amendment application PID 1005123. I have been retained by Mike Robbins, CEO of Robbins Equity Group Limited, to respond to the public special council meeting that was held on January 28th, 2021. A meeting, will be called the meeting in the letter, regarding his zoning bylaw amendment application for parcel number 1005123 on Collin Avenue, Summerside, in future referred to as the property. It is clear to us that the residents of the Bluebell subdivision are passionate about keeping their neighborhood an upscale neighborhood that is safe and friendly. My client is equally passionate about developing the property in order to maintain the aesthetics of the neighborhood while fixing the Mountain Avenue and Collin Avenue dead ends. My client fully intends to address each and every issue that was raised during the public hearing in order to develop the property with the neighbors rather than despite them. If there are any concerns not addressed herein, please do not hesitate to contact the undersigned. Family-oriented community. The concern that this development would affect the family-oriented community arose multiple times during the meeting. If the zoning is not changed from R1 to R2, the lots will have to be priced higher, which would decrease the likelihood that young families would be able to afford the lots. The lots would then only be accessible to older individuals who are not raising children in the subdivision. My client is working closely with designers and builders who are passionate about building homes for young families. Their target demographic is young professionals who are starting a family. Adding more families to the neighborhood would increase the family-oriented nature of Bluebell subdivision. My client fears that if another developer were to purchase the property, they would either attempt to rezone the property to a higher density zoning or build properties that they can use as rentals in order to make it financially viable. This would mean that another developer could completely change the family-oriented nature of the subdivision regardless of the zoning change. Additionally, there is never a guarantee of who will be moving in next door. Nearly 50% of residential houses in Summerside are zoned R2 low-density mixed residential or a higher density zoning. If changing the zoning from R1 to R2 results in a less family-oriented neighborhood, nearly half of Summerside would not be family-oriented. We know this not to be the case. Summerside is an excellent place to raise a family. Rezoning one parcel of land is not going to decrease the family-oriented nature of the Bluebell subdivision, it will increase it. Two-story homes. There was concern raised about building two-story homes. I believe this concern to not be relevant to the zoning bylaw amendment application submitted by my client. The change in the zoning will not change a potential developer's ability to build a 2- or 3-story home. The entirety of Mountain Avenue is 2-story homes. Additionally, many other homes on Collin Avenue are 2-story homes. The current R1 zoning does not preclude anyone from building 2- or even 3-story homes. Therefore, if another developer has to develop the property, they would almost certainly develop 2-story homes regardless of the zoning. If restricting the development of the corner lots or all the lots to 1 story was a sticking point, that could prevent the zoning amendment. Then my client would adjust their plan and could accommodate that restriction. However, we believe this concern to be unwarranted as the neighboring homes are 2-story homes. Increased traffic concerns. I believe this concern to not be relevant to the zoning bylaw amendment application submitted by my client. My client proposed zoning bylaw amendment application does not violate any road access restrictions under section 10.2 of the zoning bylaw. The current state of Mountain Avenue and Collin Avenue results in two dead ends. This development would resolve the two dead ends, resulting in less people turning in driveways. Additionally, government vehicles such as garbage trucks and repair vehicles would not have to turn around in private driveways. There are concerns regarding the entrance to the Bluebell subdivision at the meeting. It is my understanding that the City of Summerside is working to resolve this issue. Preventing rezoning is not the solution to the Walker Avenue exit. Fixing the entrance and exit of the Bluebell subdivision is the solution. The proposed development would ease flow of the Bluebell subdivision. If this rezoning is not approved, the development may not occur. This would mean that if and when the second exit from Bluebell is created, that all the homeowners in Collin Avenue will have to exit their road onto Walker through only the Lynn Street corner. This will likely not resolve the congestion issue. Even if a second exit is created, the proposed development would allow homeowners on Collin Avenue to use the second exit if one is constructed by traveling through the development and out Mountain Avenue rather than continue to congest the Lynn Street / Walker Avenue intersection. The traffic issue is not an issue with this development. It is an issue with the remainder of the subdivision. The traffic issue is not something my client can control. However, developing the road through the property allows for a third exit to of the subdivision to be constructed down the road. There are currently 125 approved lots in the Bluebell subdivision. Changing the zoning and adding 10 extra lots will only result in an 8% increase in traffic. This is a negligible difference when connecting Maple Grove Road and Walker could result in a 50% decrease in traffic at the Walker Avenue exit of Bluebell subdivision. Loss of green space. There was a concern raised regarding a loss of green space by developing the property. I believe this concern to not be relevant to the zoning bylaw amendment application submitted by my client. The green space is slotted for development. Regardless of whether the property is zoned as R2 or R1, as such, the green space will not remain in place. Additionally, the largest park in Summerside, Rotary Park, is in the neighbor's backyard. The loss of green space is not an issue which is relevant to the zoning amendment. My client is working very hard to develop the property with the most minimal effect on the greenery and trees of the property. Fence and or tree line. One of the residents on Mountain Avenue mentioned trying to keep some of the trees between the existing properties on Mountain Avenue and proposed new lots. My client is fully willing to keep a row of privacy trees between Mountain Avenue properties and the new development should this be required by council. Allowing R2 zoning provides council with the opportunity to ensure that privacy trees be planted. If the zoning amendment is not approved, any developer can develop the properties and remove all the trees. The plans that my client and his builder have developed ensure that from behind the semi-detached homes would appear very similar to a single-family home. Additionally, it is a long-established principle, first recorded in Eldred's case in 1610, that a landowner cannot protect the view that he has from that land. The rationale is that it would unduly limit the freedom to build on one's own land and therefore hinder beneficial development. Property value. The majority of homes in Collin Avenue are appraised by the government of PEI, government of Prince Edward Island, at less than $200,000. The fair market value of the semi-detached homes that my client will be building on this property will exceed the value of the homes on Collin Avenue. Therefore, the values of the pre-existing homes will increase as a result of construction of the semi-detached homes. Entry roads, no sidewalks, narrow roads. I believe this concern to not be relevant to the zoning bylaw amendment application submitted by my client. The concerns regarding the narrow entry roads and lack of sidewalks in the area are not relevant to my client's development and should not be considered. Additionally, these concerns should be directed towards the City of Summerside, as it is their responsibility to ensure proper roads and sidewalks. However, the roads in the Bluebell subdivision comply with the city's requirements and are sufficiently wide. Additionally, the minimal increase of 10 families in the extensive Bluebell subdivision will not make a difference in the congestion of the roads. In fact, the development of the connection between Collin Avenue and Mountain Avenue will alleviate much of the congestion on Lynn Street and create a better flowing subdivision. Additionally, this development will fix the 2 dead ends and will result in garbage trucks, snow plows, and other vehicles not having to turn around in private driveways. These concerns should not be considered when determining the approval of the zoning bylaw amendment application submitted by my client. Removing trees. I believe this concern to not be relevant to the zoning bylaw amendment application submitted by my client. The property is already approved for development without restrictions on removing trees. Any developer who wishes to develop single-family dwellings could come in and remove all the trees. The zoning bylaw amendment application submitted by my client is for the purpose of zoning the property as R2. The change in zoning does not mean that any more or less trees will remain, as there has not been a restriction placed on the trees on the property. However, accepting the zoning bylaw amendment application submitted by my client gives you the opportunity to tell my client to keep certain percentage of the trees. My client and his builder are passionate about keeping the trees and have developed a plan which keeps as many trees as possible. They have also decided to build 2-story semi-detached homes in order to limit the square footage of the lot used as opposed to 1-story structures, thus keeping more trees. My client is willing to place restrictive covenants on the land, restricting the removal of trees if necessary. Playground. I believe this concern to not be relevant to the zoning bylaw amendment application submitted by my client. The change in zoning will not adversely affect the playground. In fact, my client and Warren's Carpentry are prepared to donate to help fix the playground on a per-home basis. Therefore, if the rezoning is approved, then there would be more money donated towards the playground. Airbnb. I believe this concern to not be relevant to the zoning bylaw amendment application submitted by my client. The change in zoning will not change whether the future homeowner decides to Airbnb the property. However, should you approve the zoning amendment to R2, my client is prepared to place restricted covenants on the property, preventing commercial activity such as Airbnb would not be allowed. Not wanting duplex in the neighborhood. At the meeting, there was a lady who said how they love their neighborhood and have lived there for a number of years. She went on to say that she is getting to the age of selling her home and moving to a duplex. My client is excited by the opportunity to provide neighbors with the option of remaining in their neighborhood while being able to downsize. We believe that providing housing options allows people to remain in a neighborhood where they have close connections and creates a more united neighborhood. Community outreach. It was brought up that the neighborhood was disappointed that they weren't contacted directly before the public meeting was announced by the developer, that the developer never made any phone calls or knocked on any doors. My client would have loved to get the neighbors' input personally. However, due to COVID-19, he was unable to be here. My client is prepared to take whatever steps necessary to consult with the neighbors and enjoys hearing their input. Perhaps setting up a comment box, either electronic or physical, would help. If you have any suggestions on this, we would love to hear your feedback. My client is wanting to involve the neighbors' suggestions. Good subdivision for raising a family. I believe this concern to not be relevant to the zoning bylaw amendment application submitted by my client. The change in the zoning will not adversely affect whether the subdivision is a good place to raise a family. St. Clair Street in Summerside, as a comparison, is a mix of duplex and single-family residents with multiple families who would agree that it is a good place to raise a family. The construction of semi-detached homes will not change the ability to raise a family in the neighborhood. It will just give the opportunity for more families to raise a family there. Information about the developer online. I believe this concern not to be relevant to the zoning amendment application submitted by my client. My client is in the process of developing a new website. It is not abnormal for developers to not have a social media presence. Final thoughts. It seems as though the neighborhood has used my client's development to raise their concerns about the entire Bluebell subdivision in the city of Summerside generally. These concerns, which have no relevance to my client's development, should not hinder his ability to develop semi-detached homes. To consider the concerns which were raised, which are not relevant to the zoning bylaw amendment application submitted by my client, would be to breach your duties as officers of this lovely city. Parcel number 809350 is directly south of my client's property and is zoned R2. Clearly, the city of Summerside is not concerned with having R2 zone properties in this area. To extend the R2 zoning would not adversely affect the neighborhood. Instead, we believe changing the zoning to R2 will bring young families to the neighborhood and make it a better place to raise a family. Approving the zoning bylaw amendment application would also mean that 2 dead-end roads are resolved. No longer will garbage trucks, snow plows, and other vehicles need to be turned around in private driveways or on my client's land without approving the zoning bylaw amendment application. This land will likely never be developed, as it is not financially viable if only single-family dwellings can be erected. If this land isn't developed, then the two dead-end roads will remain that way and will never be resolved. My client is prepared to take whatever steps necessary to have this zoning bylaw amendment application approved, including entering into a development agreement pursuant to Section 5.15 subsection A of the zoning bylaw, if required. If there are any requirements for suggestions you have for my client, he is more than happy to implement them into his plans for the development. My client's goal is ultimately to make Summerside a better place to live, and we believe that approving his zoning bylaw amendment application would do just that. This is your chance to resolve the dead-end roads. This is your chance to get extra funding for playgrounds. This is your chance to attract young families to stay in Summerside. This is your chance to get the road developed to allow a third exit out of Bluebell subdivision in the future. Most importantly, this is your chance to make Summerside better. Please approve Robbins Equity Group zoning bylaw amendment application. If you have any questions or concerns, please do not hesitate to contact the undersigned. Yours truly, James Prophet. So those are the additional letters received. I'm now going to ask, before we deal with the recommendation, if staff have any further additional information or comments. Aaron?
Sure. Thank you, Councillor Feely. That's a lot of information there to read out and digest. I guess I just want to remind you that our role as staff is to try and review an application and how it relates to the official plan, how it relates to the zoning bylaw and the parks plans that have been done and reviewed over the last number of years. Also, we tried to make an effort to review the questions and statements that were made by either raised by yourselves or residents or even the developer, and review various documents in the city to see if we can provide you guys input on those so that it'll enable the planning board today to make a recommendation, and as well as provide information for the entire council to be able to make a informed decision at the monthly meeting. So I just want to recap some of and provide some additional information. If you can just bear with me, hope it doesn't repeat a lot of the stuff. Again, as was mentioned, traffic was brought up a number of times, and again, we are to consider the increased traffic from the R1 to R2. There will be an increase in traffic just from the R1 being developed itself. It will be 10 additional lots. To go to R2, again, would be a 20 lots, so it would be that we're to consider the 10 additional ones. As was mentioned, currently Walker and Colin Mountain, there's only one way out of that subdivision. There is an overall plan to, as parcels developed, provide future exits and abutting and interacting between the various landowners' parcels of land. I wonder if you can pull up a couple of those. What was mentioned on there by someone was that by allowing this connection to happen, Mountain and Colin, right now all of Colin can only go out through Lynn. So there's one there I think that had the 44 and 29, I guess, yeah. Just bear with us there. So again, that's kind of Colin Avenue, and everything that's highlighted in blue has to go out the bottom down by Lynn. So if there's ever any snow or accident, tree fall, or anything of that nature, but if this connection happens, everything that's in blue would be allowed to have a second exit out through Mountain and then out through Walker. And the same could be said for Walker, from Lynn to the south. Currently, if anything happens in that general area, this area would be provided a second access through Mountain, then out to Lynn. There still is, from that point forward out to McEwen, only one access, but as the abutting properties do develop, we will show you there's an overall general street plan for subdivisions to, as they develop, to tie in and provide future street network. Again, there was mention of traffic, so we do collect traffic in some of the local streets as well as every few years. We did collect some down closer to McEwen Road intersection. So over a course of a couple of days, we collect the data. We had roughly about 1,200 vehicles per day at that location. So if that, right now we have about 110 houses in that area. So we're looking at an additional 10 houses. So that's roughly about 10%. In one of the letters, they stated about an 8% increase. Again, that's just we went through and said the 10 houses would represent approximately 10% more than what's there now. Again, there was some mention of the various street widths. There is various street widths when you start at McEwen Road. Actually, if you go all the way back to Granville Street, Walker is probably about 10.5 meters wide, which is the width of a collector. Even though it's classed as a local street, it was built that wide, extra width. You do get to the turn or the bend that's referred to. There is a narrowing there of probably 7 to 8 meters wide. From there on in was only 6 meters wide years ago. Through the course of the infill program, Colin and the rest of Walker from the bend to the south was infilled, and part of that infill, the street goes from 6 meters wide to 8.5 meters wide with curbs. So we do have various asphalt widths. The local standard to our standard that where streets are being new built by, as well as our infill, at that time was 8.5 meters. So those streets that are remaining there are to local standard or exceeding. There is an area at the corner of the turn where they don't have the additional width to the 8.5, but that area did not have a ditch at the time, so it wasn't part of the infill. It was stated, again, I guess, sorry, I should be looking at Linda as well. That one slide she had up there did show that this area that comprises Walker, I'll say Walker, Colin, Lynn, Mountain, that comprises about 35 acres of land and was developed over a number of phases over 10 or 15 years. The last phase, this was on plans back from, as mentioned, from 87, and the last phase in Colin was done probably in 96. Unfortunately, the landowner and developer at that time passed whenever that last phase in 96 was built, so didn't get to complete the last phase of what's being currently considered here today. So that's the 35 acres. And the next comment that we had considered, and this subdivision does experience what they would call country in the city. They are 35 acres in that area. They're surrounded by about, if you go all the way right to the trail at the bottom there, the trail, all the vacant land around them, from the trail to Rotary Park, they're surrounded by 300 acres of vacant land. So they are on their own as far as have a lot of vacant land and privacy and those sort of things. But each of those private landowners, when they go to develop their property, will develop them as per the future land use plan that we had. But yes, right now they are up there on their own, and they certainly would have the experience of being in the country. Zoning, We had previously dealt with a number of developers prior to this one that have looked at this parcel of land. This is currently the fourth one that I can recall, probably in the last 5 years, that has come in and sat down with us to look at developing this parcel of land. When someone comes in, we share all the information as far as here's the road network, here's the zoning. They came back and here was the current zoning, and they all came back at the time and says it's not viable and we can't proceed. And we said that's your prerogative. Finally, the fourth one came through and said I'd still like to do it, but they in order to make the numbers work, they would have to rezone it to, as he had stated, to R2 to get more units, but at a lower price per unit. What they thought they could sell in the area. So that's why we're here today with this consideration, with the fourth developer coming forward. Again, there was a question asked, I guess, about. I'm not answering a specific question. There were a number of questions that were asked. We'll try to just keep answering them in general. Is that the number of lots in the city and the amount of zoning and what's required. Recently, we had a mix of development happen down in St. Clair. It was some R1 and some R2, and the developer was just testing the market to see what was out there and thought there was going to be a mix. They would have sold out all the R2, and they came back to the city and did expand upon another section to expand the R2 because the demand was there. If it had been all R2, they would have had it sold long before. That spurred them on to do another development out in I presume spurred them on. The demand was there. They knew the interest was there. They did another development out in Putters next to the golf course. All that property is R2. The lower part is R4, although they're still developing even some of the R4 as R2 type of development, like semis. That seems to be where the demand is. Again, if we go out to another development that's partway through construction, is Starlight opposite Lafergie. Again, that development is mostly, or a high percentage R2 with a few R1s mixed in. The same thing is mentioned out off of Spruce Drive. I can't think of the name right now, but Langell? Yes, Langell Court, thanks. Is 8 or 9 semi-detached with a row house at the end. And that has been a lot of the current demand. We also had, over the last number of years, Mackenzie Drive was zoned as R4. The demand is still dictating. They did start off with one 5 or 6 unit R4 or R3 type of a housing. Took a long time to move it individually. The rest of the demand has been to develop it as R2, even though the property is zoned as R4. So there has been also some single-family R1s that have been built on the same street as down there in Mackenzie as well. We do have one I call it a single-family R1 type of development that has just been completed as far as paved, and those lots will be coming on. So we basically have a 10-lot subdivision. And at the last 5 or 6, that's the only demand, and they just have brought that one on the market. So again, as we noted on the zoning map, there's a lot of zones that are around this parcel of land in this 300 acres. Again, it's all predominantly residential, but different densities of residential on our land use plan. And as Linda is pointing out, the street network on Collin, we have to provide an overall. Each one of these landowners could come in one at a time to request to develop their individual parcel. So back 10, 15 years ago, the city looked at the overall need and saying, where's the next growth going to happen, or major growth? And we had to allocate an overall street layout to say, here's how these parcels could knit together in an overall street network when they're done. So there is awareness at the end of Walker and Collin. There's only one way out. So at the end of Collin, that would come out into this vacant land and be developed as part of this vacant land. The existing one to the south in Gillespie is just above the trail. That's a subdivision again in the middle of the field. There's a connection left through that to bring it over towards McEwen Road to that subdivision in Balcombe. There's also one to the north to connect on a vacant land. Over to the far right is the trailer park. We have allowances to bring that road through as they develop and allow for a future connection. So there is some overall plans to, we're asked, I guess, in saying there must be overall plans. These plans have been done. This was a separate plan itself that was done 10 or 15 years ago with numerous public meetings and consultations and lots of media about it. There has been plans that have been laid out for the last 10 or 15 years for these, and we try to make sure when these developments come in that they try and conform to these overall street layouts and networks. I'm not going to talk briefly on market value. We don't do the assessing with the city. That's done with the province. The only thing I'd comment is that the question was in R1 and R2. The last couple of developments that I mentioned down in St. Clair, as well as out in Mackenzie, there's R1 and R2 being built in the same street. So I can't say that they're saying that they would be built in R1, and some of them are very large executive type homes that are being built amongst the R2. So I'll leave that as far as the market value. Again, there was some comments on parkland noted in the report by Councillor McFeely. There is an overall separate park plan for the entire city that's incorporated in part of the official plan. This Bluebell Park is included in it. It does show that in future that park is intended to be extended to the south. I refer to that property as the Mills property that's in the Mills family for years. As that property is to grow or be developed, that park would be expanded at that time. We did have the most recent development that happened off of McEwen, Foxland. As part of that development, as well as this development, all landowners are required to participate or assist with parkland contributions for the entire city. It's laid out in there based on the density of housing that's happening. So whether it's R1, R2, if it's R3 and R4, they have to make a larger contribution. At the time of that park space and green space plan, Councillor McFeely had listed off or showed the tables how many mini parks and how many large parks there are in the city. It was determined that they would, where there's small parks that need to be expanded upon, they would plan to say, here's those parks that are be add land to. Other ones where they weren't going to do, they were going to take land and use that to either purchase land or equipment to upgrade and maintain existing parklands. So that's the one that's on there now. So again, the most recent one that was brought up again was the state of the Bluebell. We note that when we go through our reviews, we advise our personal department doesn't look after the parks. We advise the community services saying, here's the comments that have come in from this neighborhood throughout a rezoning process where we have interaction with the neighbors. So we have provided that onto them. We've also advised them that the most recent park, God, I lose my names again, Foxland development, as part of their R4 development, they had to make a contribution of $43,000 to a parkland fund. I said that again will be a decision of council. We go through budget time to determine whatever's going to be happening in community services, whether that goes through a specific park or parks all over the city. So anyhow, that's an update on that one. This property itself would be a lot smaller parkland contribution, but they will be required to, the landowner stated that they'd be willing to make a contribution per lot. They are required to make I don't know if they've gone through all the details, we haven't got that far. They are required to make a parkland contribution, so whether that money, again, it's not up to our department, it's the community services and council to determine where that fund it gets allocated out to. So that's it for parkland. We touched briefly on, again, it was stated on trees. Again, whenever this parkland or this Collin Avenue had started, there is some trees at the far south end that's under consideration now. When that subdivision was started in 1990, that was all a cleared field. As you can see on the sketch that Linda has there's probably 8 or 9 houses up at the top. The first part of the road was extended through. It was an extended or an existing farm field. What they're proposing to develop is not a old growth native species of trees or what have you that this would have been, because unfortunately the development ceased and the owner had passed. The development didn't continue on and the land was left and scrub trees are eventually going to come through it. So we just wanted to pass along. That's what we noticed there as far as the trees. As was stated, every property owner has the right to grow trees and cut trees on their own property, and as long as it's on their own property. And although it's stated in the letter from the lawyer I don't feel we as the city have the right to state a certain percentage of trees. That's what's stated. I don't feel we have that right to do that, although they have stated they are willing to maintain a buffer of trees along the tree line, along the boundary. So they've stated that. But again, we have trees that are, as you can see, the heavily density area is the 50 acre. I think the city has probably 175 acres of parkland. 50 of it is right there at Rotary Park. That is controlled by the city, so it's the city has direct control over 50 acres of trees in this area, not just for these residents, but for the entire. It's being used by the entire city. So that's it for trees. Again, we just wanted to highlight that these plans, as far as street access, official plan and zones, the zones, these properties were zoned this way since 1998, and there is changes that happen over a course of every 5 to 8 years when they're reviewed. They're also brought forward, as was mentioned, numerous public meetings or open houses. The zoning up there, actually in 98, probably would have got reduced. Part of it was R1. The part that buffers onto, I'll say, the Mills property was R3. In 98, it was down zoned to R1. And in that, the time when Olive Walker and McEwen was built, in the community of that time, R1 and R3 did allow multi-unit homes, like duplexes or semis, to be built. Although the market of the day dictated that singles were the driver, and that's what got built. Right now it seems to have shifted to, based on the development. We're listening to the developers coming in. I listed off the majority of developments. We have one 10-lot subdivision coming in out of the last 7 or 8 the past 2 years that are all semis or other levels of. We do have quite a mix of housing percentages now across the city. I think the number is something like 40 to 60% is. Yeah, so currently what we have zoned in the city now is probably is R1 and R2. We got 60% of the city now is R1. R1 is 43. R2 is 20%. R3 is 20%. R4 is higher density of 14%, and R5, which is predominantly trailers, is 5%. So we have a. Sorry, I can go slower if you wish. Yeah, I talk fast. I apologize. The R1 right now is about 43%. The R2 is 19%. The R3 is 2%. The R4 is 14%, and the R5 is 4%. Now, a lot of the R3 is, if you look on our zoning map, a lot of it is, I'll say, the core of Summerside. R3, you can have single family. They just tend to be on narrower lots. You can do single family or you can do semi, but so really the single family type stuff in Summerside right now is about 60 to 65% of the entire zoning in the Summerside. So we're trying to have a balance of, that's the 63, and the market now is being driven by, when we listen to not just one developer, what's coming forward and what they're selling is a lot of R2. So that we do have land that is vacant and zoned R2, but anyhow, I'm open to. I give Brian a break from talking there, so
I appreciate that.
Open to any follow-up questions you may have.
So we will open the floor to council now, if any questions that they may have.
I have just a question of Director Aaron. The percentage that you had for R3 and R4, could you repeat that?
R3 is 20 and R4 was 14, but we're stating a lot of the R3 and the R1 are similar as far as it's being used as single family housing, but since it's on narrower lots, it goes to the R3 classification.
Okay.
You can still build R1 on R3, but you can build it on narrower lots.
Okay.
Councilor,
And you indicated, I'm sorry.
Sure.
Single family zoning, you indicated 60 to 65%?
That was the combination of what's being used. The zoning itself is 43.
Okay, thank you.
Again, we're saying to the percentage, but we went off the mapping and,
thank you, Deputy
Hi,
Mayor. Councilor McDougall.
Thank you. Aaron, the map that you had up earlier, you don't have to put it up, but
It's okay, we got a bunch
it
we
was
can-
Mountain and Collin.
Yes.
There was an intersection
yes,
there. I see in the new proposal that that intersection is gonna, the street is gonna be dropped down a lot or so? By this one here I'm talking about?
Okay. Yeah, and so you're talking, Mountain is to the left on that
Yeah.
page? Yes.
Yeah, Mountain is to the left on that page.
Yes.
So on the map that you had showed earlier, it looked like the Mountain was gonna go right through that intersection?
Yes.
Continue?
Yes.
But this does not allow that to happen?
We actually, the connection is a little bit further down the page.
I see that.
Yeah.
But there's also a water or sewer line easement to go down there, so would that just go down the street and down the other way?
As part of this development, right now, the water on Collin ends at the end of Collin, and the water ends at the end of Mountain.
Right.
That water, as part of this development, would loop those two current dead-end sections of water main.
Yeah.
The water would extend all the way south to the end of this development. It would also have to stub on the other street, because this land that backs onto Collin is not Rotary Park. There's another 50 or 100 acres that's owned
Yeah.
by a private developer. That would be this access to get to that abutting property. There is another access to this parcel right at Lynn, but in order to get a second access out, they would have to connect through this parcel.
Right. So the easement would have to go through that lot? And could you build there, or?
It wouldn't be a lot. We would maintain a 50-foot right-of-way on the,
I guess that's what's throwing me off there. If you look at that lot 20, it looks like the easement is going right across the middle of that lot.
oh, I see a dot on there, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see what
So-
you're saying, yeah.
So that would have to be moved, you couldn't
Correct.
build on top of that?
Yeah, again, this is their concept they have through, yes,
Okay.
that would not be a water line through there. Thanks.
Okay.
I see what you're talking about, yep.
Okay. The other question I have is, this, I believe, was developed in 96?
We have a map here that has
Right.
the
So-
rest of Collin.
yeah.
The
Yeah.
Collin was done in a number of phases, the very last piece of it was done in 96, yes.
Right. So my question is, this new extension, will that be done by our higher street standards, curbing, or is it grandfathered in?
No, it would be done to
The new standard?
new standard, 8.5 meter width, same
Curving.
as we made the infill, the rest of Collin to the new standard 8.5 meters. This developer would have to build to the full 8.5 meter width with curbs.
Okay. I did have, somebody else can go ahead now.
Sure.
I do have another question, but I'll come back.
Councillor Adams is next here, I think.
Thank you. I just had a few questions. In the letter that you read into the record from Cox and Palmer, it had said, under increased traffic concerns, it said, "It is my understanding that the city of Summerside is working to resolve this issue," when it talked about the entrance to Bluebell subdivision.
Yeah, as far as, I didn't speak to the gentleman, but we just received that this
Yeah.
afternoon, is that the overall, we went through and said, with any developer, so that they realize if they come in and ask about any parcel, we share the entire street network that's planned for the area, so they don't try and buy a piece of land.
Gotcha.
So they would realize that there's other streets that are going to connect onto the subdivision, not just the piece that's on Collin. I'm assuming that's what they're,
Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure. And then under the playground part in the same letter, they had put, prepared to donate to help fix the playground on a per-home basis. Are they referring to the Parkland Fund in that?
I'm not sure whether they're aware that there is a mandatory parkland, or whether they're willing to do something beyond that. But there is a parkland dedication fee that's required when the final subdivision is approved. And it's not done per lot as people go to develop, but other jurisdictions, when you go in to get your building permit, there was a parkland fee attached in other jurisdictions to every individual lot. They paid it when they went to develop the lot. Ours is so that it's when all lots are ready for sale, the entire part is paid at that time, so that the city can use it to develop a park and not be waiting until it's half done until we get the lots. But I don't know whether they want to do something, or we're willing to, or
Over and above, okay.
we would have to go over that with them and realize and explain to them the amount that was due.
Expected anyway.
It's in the requirements, yes.
Okay. And they had also put in about community outreach. And, yeah, so he just indicated he never made any phone calls or knocked on any
Yeah.
doors, but obviously you can knock on any doors, but
He-
phone calls.
He had, again, in the initial stages in his discussions with us, he was open to reaching out and talking to people when we explained that the purpose of the first meeting is really at the chance for the developer and anyone that's interested to understand about the development, but also that the council that determines also hears the discussion and that it's consistent, so that they're not going to one house and we could try and reiterate the same thing tomorrow, we wouldn't say everything the same, you know? So that it was intended, the first meeting was, we explained in the first meeting is so that you can explain your entire development, what your plan is. Everyone hears at the same time, the same verbiage, and also the council of the decision is also hearing what's being said, promised, or told to the residents,
Right.
and also that you guys can be aware of it.
Right,
So-
but there's nothing that's stopping somebody from picking up the phone.
No, I think right now, he said basically, once we went through that first step, then everybody heard it. He
Yeah.
stated, yes, he's certainly willing to, he was at the time willing to, he was even gonna consider coming down and doing the quarantine to try and, but we said we couldn't guarantee if he came, and if the rules changed, or if it happened to be a storm, and there's
Yeah.
multiple reasons there that, but he was open to having the discussions before him. We were trying to say, here's the process of the first meeting is really to engage the neighbors as well, and now he's opening up to say, I'll take anybody's calls, that at least everybody's heard the initial thing all at the start.
Council,
I just had two more. So in staff comment in F, there's two sentences there. One says, the proposed development would allow the city to connect the water mains on Mountain and Collin. And then a little bit further down says the proposed development would allow the city to connect the street network with Mountain Avenue and Collin.
Yes.
But that can be done anyways
We-
without this
no.
development?
We can't go on private property to put that main on there. So right
okay.
now, when Column was done, and I guess maybe as it evolved over time, in '96, it wasn't anticipated that Column was gonna stop and stay like that. The developer says, I'm gonna do this phase, and then I'm gonna do the rest, and then he was gonna have a turnaround at the end. As I mentioned, unfortunately, the developer passed, that land has stayed, that's private property. So when Mountain happened, that was that way for a number of years. 10 years later, when Mountain happened, we said, when the permission to do that development, they must have sought with the current or previous landowner to get permission to have a turnaround. That's why there's a turnaround from Mountain and not on Collin. So this development would link those two together permanently, and it would also connect the two water mains through.
Right, so we just connect to what they already have
But,
going on.
but we've had numerous, I should say numerous, every spring or a couple times a year, we get requests from issues that to try and come through to our CEO to try and put a turnaround on the end of Collin, and we're saying the city doesn't own the land and can't go on it, as well as to get the turnaround.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Durant.
Thanks, Councillor McFeely. I just have, I'm going to say 4 questions. We'll see how the first 3 go, and maybe there won't be a 4th. Just wondering, at the very, very end of Walker, and also like behind the southern lots on Mountain, what is that zoned as now?
Right now, it's.
If you can tell.
It's on the future land use plan as residential.
Yeah. Or
But
R1
it-
or R2?
I think it's above the black line.
Like the, just above that black line? Like immediately behind the lots on Mountain?
Or two, isn't it? That covered
Yeah, we think it's R1, and the solid black line is the split to R2.
Okay.
South of that further is R2, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so approximately, I don't know if you can tell, how far would it be from, I guess, that distance, like between where the lots are now and where it becomes R2? That empty R1,
Yeah, I guess,
Spot.
guessing maybe 60 to 70 meters.
okay. So about the size of
Half of,
maybe a couple lots wide?
the next piece over is the Collin, and you can see the entire length of Collin. It's to the right, that's the section we're talking about of Collin. And that's a little less than half of that.
Yeah.
So there's 10 lots maybe on that section, so it's probably,
So 2 or 3 lots
and just
maybe.
south of that dark black line is R2. Even though this says R2 in the one spot down below, that entire inside that black area is
Okay.
R2.
So theoretically, down the road, there might be say if Walker was continue, there might be 2 or 3 more houses, 2 or 3 more lots, and then it would become R2.
And right now, the
Today.
projection is that Walker would not continue? Is that this red dashed line would be a connection to say that allow all these other streets to connect together and not connect out to Walker, and the one?
Okay. So if that street was.
Because also right now, what's not on there is that area there is what some refer to as the pit. There's a low area, be difficult to develop, and may end up just getting used as a fill area to allow a road to go through, you know, as far as not just to fill it, but then to get housing on it. You can't tell on there, that's just on paper, but there's a low area that's like a pit area that.
Okay, so that would more than likely probably remain as is.
As is,
But-
if people want to put the money into putting fill in there to develop it, it would
Right.
be expensive lots, yeah. But the area to the south of that then would be R2, so that's kind of the.
In 2004, when Mountain was developed, was there any, you were here in
Yes, yeah.
2004, what kind of discussion, or was there opposition to that when that went in? Because
Uh,
that's probably the most recent.
I don't recall any, it would have been R1 going into R1, so typically there's not, but.
Yeah, I guess I mean typically the clearing that would have been having to take place. I just noticed on that aerial that there was mostly trees there before Mountain went in.
Correct, yeah, one of the areas, it had grown up, I guess back in the early days, it had an open area as well, but over the course of 20 years, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Actually, I don't even.
that's 1990 there, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, so you can see there's some to the south of it that's treed, a little bit above it it's less sparse, yeah. So more sparse, I guess.
Yeah. So I was just wondering what the opposition might have been like at that time.
I don't recall it again, like I've been here, I don't recall, Councillor McDougall probably would have been here myself, but I don't recall there being much opposition for.
No, I don't think there was much opposition to that at all.
Yeah.
It was all R1.
I'm just taking all this in just to.
Yeah, no, I guess.
I want to know some of the history, that's all.
Sure thing, yeah.
Two more, pretty simple ones, I guess. And he mentioned in the letter that the developer would be willing to place covenants preventing commercial activity. Is that even something, can that be done?
It
Like-
can be done, but it's not something that, the covenants are between the property owners, they're not
Right.
something between the city. As far as, there's other subdivisions say your house has to be a certain square footage, your house has to have a garage to make sure it maintains a certain executive style, or has to be over a certain square footage. Those things are above and beyond our own city regulations, and that's between the land seller and buyer.
Yeah. It just seems unlikely that somebody can promise this will never be an Airbnb.
No, I guess it's enforceable by, again.
Like
that came from a lawyer
even if the
to
house
come-
changes owners
Yeah.
5 times, like even the
Yeah.
5th.
I guess covenants, they'll get registered with the property owner.
Covenants, yeah.
So they transfer with the property owner, and that's another reason we just stay out of that as far as you set your citywide regulations and where stuff can happen, and if individual neighbors want to go beyond that to be more restrictive, that's up to them.
Okay. And then just the last thing was just when he mentioned getting feedback from residents, he referenced physical or digital comment box. Just wondering what kind of time do we have to work with? Like, is there time to kind of table this for a month or two to gather some of that feedback from residents, or? He mentioned he was willing to.
Again,
You know,
that's
receive some
was
calls
what
and-
came from the developer. We're moving forward with the rezoning process and whatever. I don't know whether he's talking what type of housing was there or what he's looking for as far as suggestions from the neighbors, but you know, I think he's just trying to reach out to be interactive
Yeah.
as to what their
Just-
thoughts
yeah.
are.
And just receiving the letter today, and I know our final decision has to be
The 16th.
in a couple weeks,
Yeah.
if not even. So I'm just wondering what kind of time that allows for that to take place. Like, does he, I guess it's just between today and that day is the time that he has to, if anybody wants to get in touch with him, kind of thing.
Mr. Chairman,
I don't have an answer to his, I gathered that he wanted to try and have an opportunity to have, as you mentioned, open dialogue with, meetings with the residents as far as what was being planned for the area that he was, other than this, to say a means of communicating.
Yeah, so that would have to be done between now and the 16th, and we'd
Or
have to
going
get
until
all
he
the
actually
feedback.
goes, until he goes to build, or whether there's,
Yeah.
because there's another step that he can't start here yet. Like, the next step is if the zoning happened, what he had there as a concept, he has to come through and get subdivision approval. The subdivision approval will have to come back to you, and that's when you decide, okay, there's this much land, can it be water and sewer, parkland, for example, you know? Once he has that, then he has to get his design done, and then, you know,
But in order for us to make the
Today is
decision
the
based,
zoning.
like, let's just say theoretically,
yep,
gentleman spoke just to all the residents, and every single resident changed their mind. We'd have to know that before this vote was to take
I
place.
mean, if council's not satisfied that it has all the information that it needs, it can table it.
Okay.
Can table, yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Councillor McDougall.
could I just interject one thing? On the letter from the lawyer, I'm not sure if the residents received the address and phone number, whatever, to contact the writer.
They have the
The
letter,
represent-
yeah.
Okay, so that would be a way of making direct contact immediately after this meeting tonight if they had any further questions.
Yeah, the letterhead, it's on the letter.
It's important for us to know, as the people that will really ultimately be making the decision, how those discussions go, I guess is where I'm getting. It's,
When we had our meeting on the 28th, I think the developer sent an email in.
Turn on your,
Oh, sorry, I didn't see Bruce's light.
no, turn yours on.
Next, and
I
then,
didn't see that, sorry.
yeah, then Councillor Snow and then Councillor Ramsey.
Okay, sorry about that. Just a couple of quick things, and I might get shot for the last one, but we'll throw it out there anyway. First is Mountain Avenue, where that cul-de-sac is. Who's responsible to join that up? Is that the city or is it the developer?
the developer will propose and design for that to connect onto Collin,
Okay,
as well as the connection that was mentioned to the abutting property on the right of the screen, so that there's a future access there
Yeah.
to the next street, so we're not into this situation of, is there a street going between these two houses? It's all to be done as part of a development.
yeah. Okay, thanks. My last point, and I don't know, our last question or statement or whatever, there was a lot of information passed by here at the first meeting, and maybe it was mentioned, maybe it wasn't, but I go back to, and you had mentioned it earlier, Langell out in off of Spruce Drive. There was quite an uproar out there, and the residents around there didn't want it to happen, but we came up with a compromise. And I'm just wondering if, you know, as Councillor Duran said, do we need more time in this? And I know that after tonight, we can decide if we need more time, but I just wanted to throw it out there. If there's any kind of a compromise that we could get here to move, that makes, I guess everybody can walk out of here like they gained something. But anyway, I just want to throw that out and to the residents and to the developers, so thank you.
And I don't know how to answer that question really. I don't, like who, you know, it's not our role to facilitate that.
No, and I guess as a counselor that was in the last one out in Langell there, I had to play a role in that, but I'm not saying that the counselor should, but I just say, I'm thinking, is there, if the developer has any appetite for a compromise, maybe the residents will listen to it. I guess that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, Bruce and I talked about that already. I think even the other night, the gentleman that was representing the builders said that if a two-story would kill the deal sort of thing, they would certainly look at one story, but there seems to be a willingness. And it,
Just where the conversation is on.
yeah.
Councillor Snow.
Well, just a few questions, and Bruce, you absolutely stole what I was going to say. I was looking at the information received from proposed developer, and obviously there's a lot of residents in the area that are concerned or interested in how this is gonna go, and I was wondering the exact same thing. Obviously, the owner took the time to listen to or watch the video the other night, go through the concerns of the residents, and tried to address each of them in his response. So I was thinking the exact same thing. Is there value in sort of getting the parties, whoever the parties are, together and seeing if there's some sort of compromise? It's not always often that we get a developer who seems to be reaching out as much as this one is. He seems to be legitimately trying to find a path forward, which is nice in regards to a developer, but then also taking the concerns of the residents into account. There might be a valuable way to move forward for everybody, but ultimately we're gonna have to make a decision one way or the other. So if there's a way to get this, you know, on the rails, that it can be positive for everybody, that's great, because there's obviously money in the recreation fund. I'm chair of community services, and I've spoke to the councillor in that area several times about the park in that area, and how we need to find that money from development in that area. So the recent one that happened that there was some opposition to, there's 43,000 there. I'm a big believer in, when you're going into a neighborhood and that stuff happens, that there has to be a benefit to the neighborhood as well. So I just think it's a valuable step forward to look at any option to make this a positive for everybody. Otherwise, somebody's obviously going to be disappointed. So if there is a way to do that, I would support doing that. And it seems like Rob has something to say. So,
CAO Rob.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members of council. Just a question, or I guess just following the point raised by Councillor McDougall and further by Councillor Snow around a potential compromise. If you were looking at maybe as an idea, like adjusting the mix of what would be contained in this property, I don't know necessarily that would be entertained as part of this process, but and Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong, if and when the developer comes back to submit a proposed subdivision plan to council for approval, then I think that's where you would see that consideration by council to say, yeah, we're okay with this potential mix or not, I guess. Aaron, would that be correct?
Yes and no. Once the property is rezoned to R2, the developer has the landowner has the right to develop the property to R2 standards. So I mean, but I understand what you're saying, is that yes, that could be the lots, and that's going to be the lot width and that sort of thing, but once the property is zoned, they would come in to meet the minimum standards as laid out for each individual zone.
Councillor Snow has
I
a follow-up, and then Barb.
I just want to give a room to Rob there, because I knew he was going to answer something that we were talking about. But to that point, so wouldn't it be valuable to consider that, if it's a possibility, and maybe there is some sort of development agreement that is suitable that we can enter into to make this move forward? Yeah, so that I just want to say that. The other thing, there was in the developer's comments, he mentions a third exit at a Bluebell subdivision. So there's only one exit at a Bluebell. How's he getting from 1 to 3?
There is an existing walker now. There's a gap in houses where we have to look at that phase. There's a stub from that subdivision to go into what I would call Benny's Field. Was built into the Walker Aver development at that time. So you'd have Walker out to McEwen, you'd have Walker into that field, and you'd have Colin exiting south into the other.
So a third exit based on future road
the
construction.
Existing one is 1. This would be number 2, and the third one exists as a vacant right of way between 2 lots towards Benny's Field. I call it. That's towards McEwen Road.
But I guess my point is, there's not going to be any additional exits until there's a road constructed either at the end of Colin or...
Correct. Right now there's 1. This is means of number 2, or if if someone had came forward in the last 15 years with Benny's land, one of the requirements of that development would have been to connect to Walker and provide a second access out of Walker.
And just to have it sort of on the record, when we were talking about additional playground funds,
Yeah.
I was looking at the developer the gentleman that's representing the developer, and he was shaking his head, sort of insinuating
Right.
that it was on top of already green fund donation that they would be willing to donate to the playground structure. So if
That's
that's the
what I
case,
thought.
it'd be nice to know, because it adds to
And
the.
we would bring that forward, like you
Yeah.
say, whenever he comes forward to subdivide and get subdivision approval, that topic is brought forward to say there's a requirement for parkland contribution. We would discuss that with the developer and advise them of that. And if they were proposing to do something on top of that, we would bring it forward. Yeah.
Okay.
It wouldn't be tied into the
Yeah.
rezoning per se, yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Ramsey, finally.
Thank you.
Councillor
And
Ramsey.
Councillor Snow did ask my question regarding Parkland Fund, and it seemed like he is aware of the fund that would have to be, okay. And the other thing I was wondering is, do the residents, or would they have an opportunity to have a copy of that letter from Cox and Palmer?
It was circulated, I
So it
believe.
was circulated, okay, because that's some effort that the developer has put into communicating with the residents. And the other thing is that I think on January 28th, our last meeting, the developer sent an email in, and he did send his phone number on that email. Is that not correct? And asked if there was anyone who needed to contact him or who wanted to contact him, to feel free to do that. And because Justin, I think you thought maybe that just happened this evening, but I do believe that that was, he did communicate that information on the 28th. So anyway, as a member of the planning board, I just want all residents to know that I'm hearing all of their concerns. And to the developer, I want him to know that we're also listening to what he is asking of us. And so I just wanted to put that out there, that this is not easy for council when there's an opportunity for a beautiful development, and then there's, you know, concerns from residents, and that's the tough part of this role. So anyway, thank you for coming in, everybody, and hopefully we come to a conclusion and a compromise where everybody's happy in the end. That's the goal. Thank you.
Yeah, just for the letter, and this was circulated the other night too, so on J. Michael Robbins' letterhead, there is a phone number there. Yeah, 226-534-9481.
Can you say that again, Brian?
226-534-9481.
So if anybody, 9481, if anybody does want that number, on anybody out in YouTube or you guys here, just you can contact any one of us councillors and we can send it off to you.
Councillor Campbell.
Oh, just a couple of comments. It's quite a spot to be in. I have doing some background and some work, I think, looking at the concerns and working with the city and of some of the problems with from our residents. I think Aaron and I have probably I've been working on this for about 6 years, but we're finally going to, I think, straighten up that corner a little bit. It said there that Mountain and Collin that would, or local streets with the capacity of 5,000 vehicles. I'd like to see 5,000 vehicles go around that corner down at Kimbers, see what was happening. So I think Aaron and I maybe have a solution to that within this year. We can straighten that up. JP and I have been working for a month or two on the parks too, and we've got some new swing sets and stuff like that. And it's not that I'm avoiding the issue, because there's going to, this is not a development or not development, it's what kind of development. So we don't want to waste our time arguing over whether we're going to or we're not going to. Is to it's gonna be R1 or R2. So, I'm gonna certainly vote against the R2 because my residents are against it and work very hard on getting what else we can get from the development for our area, like I say, the park, and fix that darn corner and keep busy that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. So any other questions from council? Any other information that we, Councillor McDougall?
I was just wondering, I'm not sure if anyone from the floor is allowed to speak. I thought they were if they had anything new.
Yeah, the way we usually do the planning board meeting is, if the opportunity for public input was the 28th, but
yeah.
we've always, with the unanimous consent of planning board, allowed members of the public to speak if they were bringing new information to the table, information that we didn't hear the other night or we haven't heard in our report. If there's new information that may impact our decision that we haven't heard before. So. Yep. From both sides. So that's kind of how we've managed that in the past, and don't see any reason why we would change that tonight.
So, Mr. Chairman, do you have a bit more information to move it forward for the next meeting?
Well, what we will do is we have the recommendation that we would read into the record and look for a mover and seconder from planning board to, and then we will vote. Well, the floor is open if there's new information. We don't want to repeat of what was said the other night. We have all that information. We have all the positions. Certainly.
Hi, my name is Sherry Lee Pike. I live at 237 Walker. I didn't speak the other night. I heard lots of people speak, and I'm hearing things tonight that I'm saying, but that's not correct. So I'm understanding that the decision is between an R1 and R2, and hopefully there'll be some compromises. The community also feels that they've been heard. But I'm hearing things like a duplex that's double-story duplexes need to be, or is what the developer would like to have. But saying, St. Clair was a street that it went did really well when the duplexes arrived there. However, the duplexes that were sold in St. Clair were all by seniors. I don't know many seniors that are going to buy a double-story duplex. So that's, for me, just right away, I'm like, but that doesn't actually, that's, for me, false information. Because what was built on St. Clair, yes, those duplexes did go quick to seniors, not to small families. And they're single story, not double, as the developer is proposing. So that's just one of the things that I thought that doesn't seem the correct information. The other thing is, when the developer is saying that all of the homes on Collin Avenue are appraised at $200,000, I can't buy a home on Collin Avenue for $200,000 in the market that it is right now. I'm hearing what the developer is saying. It's just I'm also sitting there and saying, there's duplexes being built, and I get that, and there's lots of duplexes being built, and I guess I just wanted to just state my opinion and say, what's wrong with keeping one community and in an R1 that has been the community for that? Anyway, yes.
Yeah, thank you very much, and we appreciate that, your perspective. So, thank you.
Thank you.
She knows the routine.
I was here last time, yeah.
Any other comments? And again, if you have new information, we'd love to hear it. Yeah, go ahead. Come to the mic, please. State your name and address so we have it for the record. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Scott Drummond, 259 Walker Avenue. Of course, some of you have saw my face today on CBC. But anyway, regarding sidewalks, I know that was brought up, but I don't think it was really addressed in that letter. I don't know. I know they talked about the width of the street. They said in the letter that it was 8.5 meters. but then it was also admitted that it does squeeze down into 7 meters at that corner that Councillor Campbell was mentioning and others. And I know myself from driving up through there, it's dangerous. And I know this was mentioned the other day, and I'm not trying to repeat it, but what are the ruling is on sidewalks entering into a subdivision? Can anyone answer that?
Aaron would be best.
We present a list to council every year. The criteria for sidewalks have been the last 10 or 15 years as far as schools, churches, playgrounds, trying to think if there was any other ones, connections to the trail system. And then in the past, a lot of those were being knocked off or completed. It was added to include areas of high-density housing, so where we have apartment buildings, and the intent there was to get the highest volume of users accessible. So that's the list that's kind of been presented to council every year to say, here's the existing sidewalk network. Right now, there's probably the surrounding subdivisions. We provide them on a map to say, here's the external subdivisions, and here's where the accesses are into and out of that subdivision, and whether they don't have a sidewalk, what is the actual width of the street there as far as on street, so they're not walking on the grass or gravel shoulder. So those are presented, and that's the criteria that they use to determine where they install new sidewalks.
So would Walker Avenue be considered an entrance into the subdivision?
Yes, we show Walker Avenue, we show every, I'll say, pocket subdivision. Like I can look around and say Gavin subdivision in Greenwood, or every individual subdivision is shown on a map, as well as the existing sidewalk networks, that we're not just putting a piece of sidewalk that people aren't going to connect to anything now. So yes, they would be shown as far as here's where the existing sidewalk network is in the entire city, so that also it's incorporated into the snow clearing and salting, so that they know that they're sending a sidewalk plow, which is going to continue off an existing one to do a new route and come back as far as snow clearing and salting as well. Yeah.
Okay. And I was confused about the additional exits that Councillor Snow mentioned as well. I don't think there's any additional exits going to be happening at all from this development.
No, I guess what we said is that the additional access as far as would allow Mountain and Collin, and also the Collin will extend to allow it to connect to the next parcel, which is Linda's trying to show up on the screen, is the, sorry. The red line is overall the surrounding 300 acres. Those are the at least the spine of some streets to allow connection. There will still be other streets beside that.
Those are projected streets.
But Collin is where it says the R1 at the top. That's the section of Collin that's part of this phase. So that when another parcel goes and the rest of the red road gets built, that would be another future connection out of Walker Avenue, or the entire subdivision.
Okay. And yeah, to further comment on Sherry's about the home values, I mean, I do think some of this letter, or the information in that letter, is behind lawyer language. So it becomes, you know, every one of those points where this is not part of this zoning, this is not part of this zoning, this is not part of this zoning. And of course, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't really answer to those things other than it becomes confusing, I think, when it becomes what can we say now and what can't we? It just seems to be, I don't know where to go from here, honestly, because I know the land values definitely, the houses are worth 300, 400,000 in that area, not 200.
But
I think what the gentleman stated in the letter, I'll look at it.
Yeah.
He said the provincial assessments
The
that are done.
provincial
by the province.
assessment.
Oh, absolutely, but that's not
Yeah.
market value.
But
No,
I
I'm
think
just saying that's what was
what we
stated in
need
the-
to.
That's what I read stated in the letter is, yeah.
Yeah, and we need I mean, that was a letter read into the record. That's not the report. That was
Right.
a letter read into
Understand.
the record, so.
In my last point, it's just in regards to, and this is just a general question, I guess, is this development also a stepping stone towards this east-west connector that you had mentioned on the last meeting. Does this help that? Because I know you guys said if these things don't get changed, if this development doesn't happen, is this also a benefit, I guess, to the city as a, you know what I'm saying?
The network of red is on there. As you can see, the small gray lines is everybody else's 100-acre parcel of land. So any one of these people could come in at one time and say, I'm ready to develop my land.
Right.
And we have to make sure that there's 4 there that are in the blue, that they're going to sync together in future, that the roads are going to line up and not be. So there's just an overall concept to say, here's the general intent of where roads are to go. As it's shown on there, that was done 10, 15 years ago, so that every individual landowner comes in, we can present them the overall idea of how parcels are going to connect together. They may not work in conjunction with their neighbor to coordinate a development. They may go on their own. And we're saying there's where the overall concept was done. That's why that's presented to every developer that comes in to ask.
Okay. I guess that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Okay, we need to move forward here. I think we've got the information. Hopefully people have their questions answered. I mean, I too like the concept of trying to find some common ground here, but I'm just not. Jeff? Oh yeah, certainly. Didn't see you back there.
I just wanted to add that the developer is aware of the contribution to the playground committee. Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
Jeff Adams with Warren Carpentry. 850 Reed Drive, Summerside is where we're located. So we are aware of the contribution that needs to be made to the playground, but above and beyond that, Warren Carpentry is going to donate to. Can they donate directly to that playground? Just because I know the developer's money, I know that the developer's money is generalized to the city, right? And then they can decide where it goes. But
Currently, when money comes through a development like that, it goes into a general pot and not necessarily to playgrounds in that area.
Yep.
And I guess that was my comment earlier. You know, in general, like if there's an area needing playground equipment, like has been indicated by residents in the area, and then we also have development going on in that area, like we currently do.
Yep.
I was saying it makes a lot of sense for that money that comes in should go to the park in that area. So that I was just sort of saying that out loud to let my other councillors hear, as well as people in the area, and sort of half a commitment to the councillor in the area that I'm willing to work with that, being chair of that community services. So I guess if that explains it.
Okay. And then too, with like the development and the type of semi-detached that we built, there is 3 designs: 2-story with 2 bathroom, 2-bedroom with 2 bathroom, single story, 3-bedroom, 2 bathroom, single story, 3-bedroom, 3-bathroom, 2-story. So it's the people that are purchasing them will make the decision as to what gets built. The exact same as if it was an R1, whoever purchases it, they decide if they want to build a 1-story or a 2-story or a 2-bedroom or a 3-bedroom. So it's going to be the same concept for the subdivision if it's an R1 or if it's an R2.
So are you, sorry if it's okay, so are you saying basically it gets rezoned?
Yes.
If it gets rezoned?
If it gets rezoned.
The lots go up for sale, is the intent or the thought behind it, and then based on the people purchasing the lots or the...
We're hoping
is
to...
it like chicken or egg, like are they being built first then put up for sale, or what's driving what?
Yeah,
What's
the plan would be to put up a model, let's say, and then the intent from there would be hopefully to have them pre-sold. Based off what's happening on Putter and what happened on St. Clair, they were selling before they were built.
Right.
So if you've got 3 models to pick from, you can pick your siding, you can pick your stone, you can pick your fireplace. Instead of walking in and having to pick what's there, it gives them more of a personalized home to buy, I guess is what I'm trying to put forward.
Thanks.
And I think that's, and also I was talking to Mike since the last meeting, and I just wanted to make it aware that his phone number is there and his email is there, as you stated, and he hasn't been contacted at all by anybody, but is definitely willing to talk to whoever would like to talk to him about or have any questions directly to him about the development. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Anderson.
Colin, can you make sure the headline tomorrow isn't, "We're always willing to take your money"?
I spoke last week, and I apologize for taking more time. My primary concern was adding more people into that subdivision when there's only one exit. I think it's terribly irresponsible of council to even consider adding that many more people when it all chokes down to the end of Walker Street. And I've heard nothing here tonight other than, yeah, someday we're going to be, and there's red lines running through the back fields, none of which I understand because I can't see it from that far away. Nothing here has addressed that as far as I'm concerned. The second thing I'd like to just refute is the letter that came from the lawyer says that they're going to build family-friendly, young family-friendly units. Duplexes do not sell to young families, they sell to seniors, in my experience, and from what I've seen around this city. Those are my 2 points. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. And we have a hand up in the back there.
You're going to need more help.
Hi, my name is Jamie Matheson. I live at 254 Collin Avenue. And just to follow up on a couple of points discussed tonight, there's been talk about alternate routes into the subdivision, off Walker, off Collin, and I'm a Collin Avenue resident, so I'll address the option of a connector, a corridor to Collin Avenue, and I don't know if that will address or alleviate issues with traffic, because then you would have people coming from Reed's Corner or up Water Street East, and there'd be a straight shot to the grocery store or to Walmart or hospitals, wherever the case may be. So I just wanted to clarify that. And then maybe just to kind of sum up, I think the feeling around residents is the reason why our family bought into that subdivision 10 years ago was because it was single family dwelling homes. And to change it from R1 to R2 would kind of, you feel a little bit like you have the rug being pulled out from underneath you. So I just wanted to I wouldn't feel right walking out here tonight without just kind of echoing that. So thanks a lot for the opportunity to speak and for your time.
Thank you, Amy. Okay, any other comments? I don't want to stifle anybody from speaking, but again, just to reiterate, if it's new information, we'd love to hear it. Okay, Planning Board, and again, just to confirm, the Planning Board consists of Councillor Ramsey, Adams, and myself. I think I'll read the recommendation into the record. I think that as a Planning Board, we have three options. Pass the resolution, pass the recommendation, defeat it, and then the recommendation would go to council without the endorsement of the Planning Board. The third option would be to table it and direct staff to have a further discussion with the developer about a different mix of housing or something in there. So I think those are our three options. There may be others, but that somebody can think of. So from a Planning Board perspective, those is what we, in dealing with the resolution, I think those are our three options, really.
Just based on Mr. Anderson's comments, is there, because we talked earlier about, trying to get them together for a discussion, but by the sounds of his comments, and he's only one property owner, but it sounds as though there's no desire for redevelopment of any R2, any mix of housing, because of the one exit. So maybe I just when I heard that comment, I'm just thinking out loud, like, is there a value in getting the parties together if there's no desire at all? Hopefully there's some sort of desire for communication, because I'm a big believer in communicating, and who knows what comes out of it, but
I don't know if there's any common ground there at all.
Yeah.
But it is an option for Planning Board, I believe, to defer and pass it back to staff to explore that further, I guess. Councillor?
I think my point would be, it would be up to the developer to see if he wants to. I would think, when does this go to the council? In
17th, if we.
17th?
Yeah.
So I would suggest that we send it through tonight for approval or denial at the council meeting. And in the meantime, if the developer has some interest, we can always table it at that point.
But I think if we table this tonight and let people communicate, they can still, I think that'd be a planning board decision either way.
It's a planning board
Correct?
decision. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah,
we
you
need
fellas
to
do
put
what
the
you're gonna do.
motion on the floor, and then, planning board can,
Right? Well, I think that's.
yeah, so I
thought
think
that
the
was what
option
we-
for planning board really is to, well, there are those three options: pass it, defeat it, or defer.
I'm going to give my opinion on that. And I think with the amount of conversation from both the residents and the developer, it really does seem like the developer wants to try and work something out. And because he's not here and we can't talk to him, I think that, maybe it is an option or an opportunity to just table this and let staff.
Yeah, well, I think in
That's
terms of process, we would put the motion on the floor, and then there would be a motion to defer, if that's the wish of planning board.
Well, I guess, I don't think anybody's prepared to make a decision tonight because there's still too many things that may be able to be worked out. CAO, I'm looking over at you. This is not the final decision, but it still gives a little bit of time for people to kind of.
Because we didn't get the letter from the solicitor until today. There's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, this
there.
afternoon.
Yeah,
Right.
there's a lot of opportunities.
So, and just trying to be fair to everyone, council as well as the folks who live in the area and the developer. And so.
So I will read the recommendation into the record, ask for a mover and seconder. If nobody's prepared to move and seconder, somebody may want to move a motion to defer it. Okay. Planning board recommendation. The planning board have reviewed the application and have considered the criteria under section 5.7 of the zoning bylaw and section 8.4 of the Parks and Green Space Plan. The planning board recommend the application received from Robin Equity Group Limited for PID number 1005123 to amend the city zoning bylaw from single-family residential R1 zone to low-density mixed residential R2 zone be approved by council. And I would look for a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Adams. You could still put a motion to table it on. But we don't have a seconder. If we don't have a seconder, it dies, and then.
Okay, so I want to be clear on what I'm doing. I will second this motion, and then we can put another motion on the table. Is that what you're saying?
You can put another motion
Okay.
on the table, yes.
So Carrie and myself, okay.
So.
Yep.
Okay. So it's been moved and seconded.
Okay.
Is it your wish to put another motion, that we defer the motion?
Yep. So do you want me to say that, or?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's my wish that we defer this motion and just table it and give the folks a little more time to work this out, if there's any working it out. Maybe there isn't, but I'd just like to give it a little more time, given that we just received that letter today from the lawyer, and still people are speaking on how they're feeling. There's still a lot of opposition, so maybe a little more time would work. So, I would like to move that
So there's a
motion.
motion on the floor that we defer
Mhm.
the decision pending more information.
Pending more information.
From the
Yeah.
developer.
Well, oh, yeah.
Yeah. And-
On working out some kind of a compromise if we can.
Okay, is there a seconder for that motion?
I will second it, but I'm not understanding why we're doing this now and not waiting till next week, after we have another full week to think about it and to let the developer reach out to us. Like, I don't know why we're just not letting things take its course and then deferring it if we have to, instead of giving everybody an opportunity over the next week to get together if the residents and developer wish.
Well, isn't that the
No,
very
because
same thing?
no, because this would give them an extra week to work on it together. Rob?
You can do one of two things. You could do, you could have the original motion seconded, and you can vote on it, and you can vote to defeat it, and you can have a new motion to say that we'd like to have additional conversations with the developer, and that can be voted on by planning board.
Okay, so we have the original motion, it's been moved and
It's
seconded.
been moved, yes.
We have,
And then I was
Your
just going to
motion has
defer
been
it
moved.
and let some conversation take place. If we don't do it that way, we wait until it goes to council, and then there can be conversation anyway, I guess. It doesn't matter, CAO.
council could defer it.
And then we
On
could defer it down the road.
If we defer it down the road, see what happens in the next couple of weeks. So, given that, would you wish to withdraw your motion to defer, and we'll deal with the original motion?
As long as there's an opportunity.
There's an opportunity at
That's-
council.
By an extra week.
That's all I am worried about, is that there's an opportunity to try and work this out somehow for everybody, and, okay, so we can leave
And
it.
there's always the option down the road for council to defer if nothing happens in the next couple of
Right. I was just going with one of our three options.
Yeah.
The
Well,
third
those are-
option was
those
to
were the
table
three
it
options,
and
but
to
as-
make sure.
As we discuss it.
Yeah.
So then, we have a motion on the floor, so just so that we're clear, if
I'll withdraw my motion.
withdraw the second motion.
The
yeah.
second motion, yes.
So the original motion is on the floor, it's been duly moved and seconded. Just so that we're clear, if we pass that motion, the recommendation would go to council indicating that that the rezoning is endorsed by planning board. If we defeat that motion, the recommendation would go to council indicating that it's not endorsed by council. So we're clear. We're clear? Barb, you should hear.
Say it one more time.
If we pass the motion,
Yep,
it would go to council indicating that the motion is endorsed by, that the rezoning is endorsed by planning board. If we defeat the motion, it would go to council, still go to council, but the indication would be that planning board does not endorse the rezoning.
well, right now, I don't want to endorse the rezoning.
So then-
Because I think there needs to be more conversation, so
Well,
I will,
exactly. So-
I'm going to vote against that.
Yeah, so that's the rationale for
Yep.
voting against it. So we're clear?
We're
You're
clear.
The voting members are clear?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so I'll read the motion again, and the planning board have reviewed the application and have considered the criteria under section 5.7 of the zoning bylaw and section 8.4 of the Parks and Green Space Plan. The planning board recommend the application received from Robbins Equity Group Limited for PID number 1005123 to amend the city zoning bylaw from single-family residential R1 zone to low-density mixed residential R2 zone be approved by council. And that was moved by Councillor Adams and seconded by Councillor Ramsey. Are we ready for the question?
Mr. Chair, just one final point, not to throw another wrench into it. Leave it to me to do it. The deputy mayor can also vote because the mayor has voted on previous planning board motions.
Yes.
And where he has declared a conflict of interest and she is sitting in his place, she has all the rights and privileges thereon that go with that chair role. No?
so,
You plan.
so we have, yeah, 3 members voting, I'd only vote as a chair, or a tie. The good news is there won't be a tie because there's 3 members voting, so.
Right.
So that's good. So you all heard the motion, you're all comfortable with the motion? We'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Too used to it, sorry.
Contrary, nay?
Nay.
So, nay?
Nay.
Nay? Nay. Okay. So the motion is defeated. So the recommendation would go to council without the
Recommendation. Yep.
endorsement of planning board.
That's right.
And that will happen on the 17th.
So do you want to just explain to the public since they have to hear?
Oh, my
Tuesday
goodness.
the 16th.
It's
Tuesday the
Excuse
16th.
me.
Brian, can I say
Yeah.
one more thing, just to clear my own name?
Sure.
In reference to what Corey or Councilor Snowden said, my argument is not with the developer. Like I'm always open to compromise, I'll talk to anybody about anything. My argument is with the city council, allowing any kind of development which adds numbers onto that bottom line.
And Mr. Anderson, and that's how I totally understood it. So just so I'm clear, I was saying that without there being another exit, there's not much conversation to be had based on your comment.
Yeah.
So that's what I meant by.
Compromise is not with the developer, it's with
Right,
the city.
right, yes.
Yeah,
No,
Yeah, understood.
I think
Thanks,
we're on
Don.
the same
Thanks
page.
for the clarity. Okay, so basically what we did tonight is I'm not sure we did it. The Planning board reviewed the information. I think certainly by the vote, there was consensus that we weren't comfortable at this point in time with the information that we had to make a recommendation for acceptance to council, and the motion was defeated. So that means that the planning board recommendation will go forward to council, but will not have the endorsement of planning board. So council will still vote and make a decision on the 16th, and consider the options at that time. And in the meantime, between now and the 16th, we'll see what happens in terms of trying to get to some common area. So everybody, it's full council. It's not a planning board vote on the 16th. It's a council vote. Sorry about the confusion around process, but these are the processes that are defined for us, not necessarily the ones that we enjoy doing. With that, unless there's anything else, I will ask for a motion to adjourn planning board.
And we'd just like to thank all members of the public for attending tonight and being patient and respectful as we walk through this whole process.